including a gigantic 50,000 tons of wheat aboard a US vessel. The most effective way of bombarding this country with food is by road convoys and pickups from the port. Securing the port and reopening it was crucial to this country's survival. A tugboat steaming past the shipwreck at the entrance to Mogadishu harbour was sent out to help guide in the precious cargo of food. 3,000 tons of wheat, by no means a staggering amount, on board the Sea Pearl. But it was safe to dock, at long last. The World Food Programme was shelled out of the port last time this was attempted, almost 3 weeks ago. This shipment was the first time food has reached the quayside in 2 months. Before, it was a war zone, the target of food bandits and corrupt dealers extorting money from the relief agencies. Now it's free, under the control of US Marines.
This will start an entire food flow into Somalia. We have 4 more ships waiting just offshore with another 30,000 tons of food in them, ready to move in within 10 days. In fact, what you'll see here is continuous aid ships coming in. They'll come in and unload one after the other after the other.
Not everyone was happy. Disarmed and dissatisfied Somalis who used to rule the port were outraged that they'd been cut out.
We have been completely conquered. We are not accepting this. Well, what are we going to do after they get everything? How can we live? That's impossible. We are giving some payment about this.
Before, it would have cost the World Food Programme up to $18,000 to pay off the gunmen for this one ship alone.
But we're not going to pay anything else, any other types of fees or extortionate demands that they may require out of us, including food or money.
The port can take 5 ships at a time once it's reorganized. The aid organizations now have the food and vehicles to transport it, but supplies can't move out of the capital until the Marines are ready. But how much longer to wait?
If the military gets into Baidoa and makes that safe enough for a convoy to go, then it would be a day or 2 after the Marines going into a place like Baidoa. It would happen very quickly.
The military is consolidating the seaport and airstrip. A forward base is being set up some 50 miles from Mogadishu. When Marine reinforcements are set there, orders to secure Baidoa would soon follow. Belgian forces have linked up with US and French troops, and massive reinforcements of Marines and soldiers are expected to start arriving next week. It's still unclear how many Somali gunmen were killed when a US Cobra helicopter gunship destroyed 3 well-armed vehicles with air-to-ground missiles. Locals say that 2 gunmen were killed and 3 wounded in the first exchange of fire between US forces and a Somali militia. The casualties are unconfirmed by the military. Meanwhile, a deadline for the technicals or gunmen to assemble and disarm has passed with no response. Over in Baidoa, the feeding centres are struggling to meet the needs of a huge refugee influx that helped create the levels of mass starvation. Food has been getting into both Baidoa and Badera, another hunger zone, but only by air, and the amounts are insufficient. Not until the Marines have expanded their security umbrella to these outlying areas can Operation Restore Hope begin to ease the terrible suffering. So everything here hangs on the military's next move. And as anxious as the aid organizations are to get relief moving, that cannot happen until the forces are ready to begin escorting convoys into the interior. I'm Brent Sadler, CNN report.
Hey, for the first time in over 7 weeks, a relief ship docked at the city port. Brent Sadler is that.
A tugboat steaming past the shipwreck at the entrance to Mogadishu harbour was sent out to help guide in the precious cargo of food. 3,000 tons of wheat, by no means a staggering amount, on board the Sea Pearl. But it was safe to dock, at long last. The World Food Programme was shelled out of the port last time this was attempted, almost 3 weeks ago.
This will start an entire food flow into Somalia. We have 4 more ships waiting just offshore with another 30,000 tons of food in them, ready to move in within 10 days.
Not everyone was happy. Disarmed and dissatisfied Somalis who used to rule the port were outraged that they'd been cut out.
We have been completely conquered. We are not accepting this. Well, what are we going to do after they get everything? How can we live?
Before, it would have cost the World Food Programme up to $18,000 to pay off the gunmen for this one ship alone.
but we're not going to pay anything else. Any other types of fees or extortionate demands that they may require out of us, including food or money.
The port can take 5 ships at a time once it's reorganized. The aid organizations now have the food and vehicles to transport it, but supplies can't move out of the capital until the Marines are ready. But how much longer to wait?
If the military gets into Baidoa and makes that safe enough for a convoy to go, then it would be a day or two after the Marines going into a place like Baidoa. It would happen very quickly.
The military is consolidating the seaport and airstrip. A forward base is being set up some 50 miles from Mogadishu. When Marine reinforcements are sent there, orders to secure Baidoa would soon follow. Belgian forces have linked up with US and French troops.
Many homeless people and those who try to bring relief to the homeless. Rusty Dornan reports.
Living on the streets for 5 years, down and out, Aubrey Mackey says he feels compassion for starving Somalis, but disappointed the Yanks are coming there and not here.
I can feel for the people, But then again, I look at my situation, there's a lot of racism right here in America.
I can see helping somebody that really needs it. Right now, we need it.
There are starving people here.
But for some, there's no comparison between the streets of San Francisco and Mogadishu.
You know they dying, they see the little kids and everybody. I see that on TV, I can't watch that kind of stuff. And we all sitting here all full, throwing food away. I just threw some food away.
Those people on the brink of death, like this, I don't feel like they should turn away. It's good to see that they're going to do something, make sure they get fed.
Yeah, they should help, give them food and stuff. Always should help people, whoever's ever hungry.
While some cheer help for Somalia, other homeless and homeless advocates question why U.S. troops can't rescue their own.
I feel they should take care of home first. And then whatever money and funds are left over or food, then they can go abroad.
We have the resources and the people power to bring it in, whether it's the Marines or the National Guard or the Red Cross or FEMA, and deal with homelessness as a disaster.
U.S. mayors are up in arms, criticizing the federal government for stepping over the homeless here only to help those abroad.
So far, we have not shown any inclination as a national government to fight the battle here in our cities. We've been more inclined to fight the battle outside of the borders of the United States.
Few would begrudge helping starving Somalis, but some wonder why the same intensity, enthusiasm, and money can't come home. Rusty Dornan for CNN, San Francisco.
The president-elect's economic conference begins tomorrow in Arkansas. CNN's Wolf Blitzer is in Little Rock to tell us what to expect in these coming 2 days. Wolf.
David, at this hour, 329 guests from business, labor, and
Att få somalier gjort något direkt motstånd har tagit betydligt längre tid att genomsöka områden runt flygplatsen och hamnen. Ansvariga säger att miljonstaden Mogadishu först måste vara säker innan trupper kan resa ut till landet och de svältande, och det har väckt kritik.
I am surprised and I am slightly disappointed. Partly from anything else, I'm very anxious for my team in Baidoa.
I Mogadishu är grytorna fulla. Och det är frustrerande att inte samma hjälp kan nå ut till andra hundratusentals som hotas av svältdöden. Men trots svårigheter och kritik kunde ett danskt fartyg ligga till i hamnen i morse. Det var det första sedan oktober. De amerikanska trupperna tog hand om säkerheten istället för beväpnade män. Men de som tidigare tjänat hundratusentals dollar känner sig överkörda.
I think this is exactly one of the problems that we used to have before. Only before they were backed up by tanks and guns, and we didn't have much choice. Today we can tell them no extortion. We'll pay all the normal fees that we would normally pay, but that's it, nothing extra.
FN-trupperna är i Somalia för att trygga mattransporterna. Men uppdraget innebär på gott och ont så mycket mer.
We're running a 24-hour operation here, and we're moving as quick as we can. I mean, we don't have a magic wand, and we can't just magically make things happen. It takes time, and That's why we're here. This is not a short operation. We're not
Gone berserk on a rooftop, opening fire on anyone who comes near.
Unfortunately, he's already made an enemy of the crew of another vehicle by shooting at them, which started the whole incident. At the moment, we're trying to stop them from bringing him down by fire.
The guard is eventually persuaded to come down and no one is hurt. Relations with security guards are often uneasy, but the guards are needed for protection. Especially now, aid workers face daily attacks by gunmen trying to steal what they can before U.S. Marines get here to restore law and order.
We have had firefights in front of our compound with bullets going all over the place.
Baidoa will be a primary staging point for coalition forces in the famine zone of southern Somalia. The military airfield allows access for cargo planes, and from here, food and relief supplies can be delivered over a wide area. Securing this town may be a high priority for U.S. Marines, but they can't get here fast enough for many aid workers.
Every day that they are expected, but they do not arrive, creates more tension in the town.
After U.S. troops landed in Mogadishu, it was a bad week for relief agencies in Baidoa. Offices and houses were attacked and looted when it was rumored the Marines would arrive over the weekend.
There is a bit this feeling that now it's the last 5-6 days, so do what you want and try to collect as much as possible.
Now, U.S. forces are not expected here until later this week. Relief agencies have evacuated all but essential personnel, and aid workers are bracing for last-ditch attacks by desperate armed gangs.
We've heard rumors going that for several nights running that they're planning on hitting the organizations, sort of dividing them up to loot them out just before the troops. Once the troops come, it's all over for them.
Aid workers here say they're not criticizing the U.S. military for delays in reaching Baidoa. They say they understand the need for careful planning, but in their view, only a few Marines would be necessary to do the job.
There are very few looters left. The ones that are left are very dangerous, but the minute a few Marines arrive, they'll be gone.
Over the weekend, U.S. fighter planes flew reconnaissance over Baidoa. Most of the armed gunmen and their vehicles have already left town. Relief agencies have beefed up their security to make it clear to the looters they will pay a heavy price for any attack. It was always a difficult and dangerous assignment for aid workers here, and the situation has been aggravated by the military intervention. But everyone hopes the worst of it is over, counting the days until the Marines arrive. Gary Stryker,
But underneath all these were similar differences that came to the open with the ouster of said barrier from power.
But one now has to learn a new vocabulary on Somalia. One has to learn whether you are Somali, whether you are a Darut, or whether you are a Hawiya, whether you are an Ishaq, and if you are a Darut or a Hawiya, which clan you belong, which sub-clan you belong, and it's a very, very sad thing.
Officially, there are 9 factions contesting for power in Somalia, each carrying a sphere of influence, with constant alliances being formed and broken. On the 12th of last month, the Somali National Alliance formed by General Farah Aidid broke down. It lasted for only a couple of weeks. The war in Somalia is between brothers and cousins.
For instance, in the Hawiye group, Mahdi is Afghan. Although they're all Hawiyas. Aidid is Afghan. Then Omar Hashim is Hawado. They're all Hawiyas. But you see, because they love these placing things on ground, outsiders who want to actually help have to recognize this.
There is a new addition to the already crowded and complicated power game. They call themselves the Somali African Multi-Organization. They are black Somalis who say they have all along remained on the sidelines of their country's politics. They are poor and uneducated.
Till African leaders are willing to call them and listen to them and investigate their problems, we would not be touching the roots of what emerged now as a clan struggle.
The Somali African Multi-Organization is not after secession. All they want is a chance to be a part of any peace process and the right to belong. Yusuf Jibo, NTA News Nigeria, for the CNN World Report.
U.S. helicopter gunships fought fire with fire in Somalia over the weekend.
They destroyed 3 Somali armored vehicles that had opened fire on the gunships. An unknown number of injuries were reported. The exchange of gunfire was the first between the two sides since the U.S. military arrived in Somalia to help deliver food to the starving people. CNN has more on the deployment in the Horn of Africa nation.
Thousands of men and women in the U.S. Armed Forces are leaving the wet winter weather of North America for the monsoon rains of East Africa, and a mission full of uncertainties.
It's something that should have been started a long time ago. To be honest, I'm pretty scared.
We can't trust anybody, you know that.
The glare of publicity surrounding the first U.S. troops to arrive highlighted the conflict between letting the world know the Marines had landed and letting potential adversaries know precisely where.
I think we have to just say the bottom line is that we're all thankful that nobody got hurt.
So far, there have been more encounters with armed men in the capital than with the starving people in the countryside, whose feeding is the stated purpose of the multinational mission.
Much as we'd like to be able to totally dominate the country border to border from the outset, we need to proceed carefully and cautiously, keeping in mind the risk to our own troops and make certain that we've got a secure base before we reach out to the next community.
The political progress in Somalia's capital has not erased concern about the long-term difference between making peace and keeping it.
While we might go in and carve out these corridors and deliver some food, we come out and leave it like that, the hostilities will simply recur.
The U.S. was the first of several countries to join the UN's tiny peacekeeping force already in Somalia.
We're not the world's policemen. But in this particular case, we were the one nation who could provide the leadership and capability to get into Somalia and begin to correct that situation.
What we don't want to do is have the international community say, thank you very much, you're there now, stay now as long as you need to until all of this is settled. That cannot be a long-term kind of military commitment.
Things can get pretty hairy at night, you know, with civilians running around and shots being fired over the agency.
Despite early assurances from Washington that the U.S. presence in Somalia would last weeks rather than months, the UN Secretary General has already suggested a longer-term involvement. And some Europeans are already suggesting the multinational operation in Africa might be a model for problem-solving closer to home.
If it's possible in Somalia, why not in Yugoslavia as well?
From CNN in the United States, Mark Lepp for the CNN World Report.
First time to set up a staging post at Baridogle near Mogadishu. But American commanders say they're not yet ready to send troops to the beleaguered towns of Baidoa and Kismayo, where aid workers have made urgent appeals for help. This report by Carol Walker.
Marines met no resistance as they took control of a former military airbase 50 miles from the capital. This airstrip in the midst of scrubland will become an important staging post for relief supplies to the famine areas, though thousands more troops and crates of equipment will be flown in first. 3,000 tons of wheat from the European community unloaded at Mogadishu port this morning was the first aid shipment here for 2 months. The Americans are escorting relief supplies across the city, but still refuse to say when they'll move into Baidoa, where they are really needed.
We're pressing to go to Baidoa as quickly as we can, but it requires the right kind of troops, the right kind of support logistics, and I will not go to Baidoa until I can, number one, protect the forces that go there, and be able to impose the right kind of security environment on Baidoa when we get there.
The Americans now say the devastating helicopter attack on militia vehicles yesterday was a response to a series of shots fired at their helicopter patrols. Local militia leaders say 12 Somalis were killed. The Americans say this attack was within their rules of engagement. Certainly it has shown the Somalis that they mean business and that their firepower is quite overwhelming. Carol Walker, BBC News, Mogadishu.
Marines are busy moving that food off the ship. 17 miles south of Mogadishu, UN workers started pumps to get water to Mogadishu. Water's been cut off to the capital for 2 years. Meanwhile, Marines completed their first major mission outside the capital. They secured an airstrip on the road to the town of Baidoa. Mark Dolnich reports.
Echo Company got the call again. Move into an area that could contain hostile forces, secure it, and wait for reinforcements. But it turned out to be easier than anyone had expected this Sunday. Company Commander Captain David Hall called his men together to go over the operation and to explain a change in their all-important rules of engagement. They are somewhat less hostile right now.
All right, the rules of engagement are a little more restrictive than they were the first day. You have to take every means necessary, every lesser means necessary to disarm any kind of civilian with a weapon or any crew-served weapon. Deadly force is a last result.
Before noon, 2 waves of helicopters flew from Mogadishu Airport to an airstrip at Beladogle. The half-hour flight covered farmland that was surprisingly green from the air. 3rd Platoon was among the first to touch ground and spread out. They'd been briefed earlier that the situation here had improved substantially over the previous few hours.
Adid and Mahdi got together the other day for a press conference, shook hands, hugged, said no more fighting, we're going to stop it all. Put about 15 meters between each man.
Marines went about their business as they always do, setting up perimeters, digging in machine gun positions, and staying ready for anything. Within minutes after the second wave of Marines landed here, a large cargo plane set down carrying precious food. It was the payoff, the reason the Marines came to Somalia. This first shipment came courtesy of the British Royal Air Force, and it carried rice from France. The second beachhead in Somalia brings Operation Restore Hope another 50 miles inland from Mogadishu. Marines say there will be several similar operations in the near future, but a firm timetable is yet to be printed. But if anything, Sunday's events point to an increase in the tempo of operations here. Marked only CNN at the Beladogle airfield, Somalia.
Despite fearing hidden their weapons and outside the areas under American control, the militia groups are as well armed as ever, with some artillery and armored vehicles, as well as machine guns and pistols. American commanders here say that at the moment their mandate is to deliver relief supplies. Clearly there is a recognition that the large numbers of weapons in this country remain a potential threat to the relief operations. The question is how far Somalia's warlords are prepared to cooperate in any wider attempt to disarm their fighters. Carol Walker, BBC News.
Ett dramatiskt och våldsamt exempel på detta utspelades i morse inför tv-kamerorna.
En amerikansk patrull i Mogadishu, i ingenmansland vid fronten mellan 2 klanherrar. Här hotar krypskyttar från de beväpnade gängen. Trots att Mogadishu blivit mindre farligt har utländska hjälparbetare och journalister på sistone allt oftare blivit offer för våld. Det låter paradoxalt, men kan bero på att de tidigare alltid tog beväpnad somalisk eskort med sig när de får ut. Nu är somalierna rädda att vapnen ska beslagtas, så många lämnar dem hemma. Och då blir fältet friare för de som inte gömmer undan sina vapen. En del våld sker inom synhåll för de utländska trupperna, utan att de ingriper. Vi är inte Mogadishu-polisen, kommenterar den amerikanske militärtalesmannen. Ett exempel på motviljan mot främlingarnas och enligt vissa somalier särskilt mot de hårdhänta fransmännens närvaro kom idag alldeles utanför ett hotell med många utländska fotografer. En somalisk kvinna kliver av en fransk jeep. Varför hon satt i den är inte klart. Men i det muslimska Somalia gör inte kvinnor vad de vill. Och hon omringas genast av uppretade män som dragit sina egna slutsatser. De skriker hora åt henne och börjar misshandla henne. Efter en stund kommer påkar och käppar fram. Och kläderna slits av henne.
En somalisk kvinnoorganisation.
Area about 75 miles away from Baidoa tells CNN that they expect to begin moving out as early as tonight, although military spokesmen here in Mogadishu won't confirm that. U.S. warplanes screeched overhead the town of Baidoa in another reconnaissance mission today, and U.S. military officials here say that U.S. transport planes based in Mombasa in Kenya continue to fly in food. It's part of the international relief effort that began this summer.
The United States Air Force C-130s working out of Mombasa. The Joint Task Force Provide Relief has continued to deliver supplies. As you said, 6 flights into Baidoa today. Some folks, your colleagues are up there in Baidoa, have reported seeing Americans on the ground. I'm not going to comment about individual sightings of Americans, but I will tell you that yes, you know, we asked when we were going to Baidoa, we went there 6 times today. And we may go there 6 times tomorrow. We may go 7, who knows?
The food that went in today would be enough to feed all the people of Baidoa for 3 days if it could get out and move around without being looted. There are about 100,000 people there, and as CNN's Jim Clancy reports, more than half of those are refugees coming from areas that are even worse off.
Someone, it seems, is always walking along the roads in Somalia's famine zone, barefoot and with only the rags on their backs. The hungry making their way from the countryside to feeding centers in major towns. Few thought they would find this when they arrived. Frantic crowds of people desperate to get well. It too is becoming a center for refugees, and it too is filled with havoc at feeding time. Even before the food was divided, it was obvious there wouldn't be enough. Here, like everywhere else in Somalia, there is always a shortage of food and always an abundance of sorrow. Sorrow in a mother's eyes as villagers help lay her daughter in a shallow grave by the road. The 14-year-old died of malaria, one of about 15 burials today in Gorasan. A village elder tells us that in the last 2 years, 14,000 people died here. Some came from the village, but many others were refugees who live in the hastily built huts made of dry brush, huts lined with cardboard or rags to keep out the cold. Alongside the refugees and all around the village, a sorghum crop is ready for harvest. It won't replace the bags of grain from places like Australia and the United States. The people here will need that help for some time to come. Elders say this crop isn't so good because of a lack of fertilizer, rain, and workers with enough energy left to tend the fields. But the once fertile land around this village is calling home some of its children that went off in search of food. I think maybe the situation in Somalia will get better, said Suldana. She's bringing her 2- and 5-year-olds home to Gorasan to begin a garden. For this mother and perhaps tens of thousands like her, the traveling in search of food may be coming to an end. Somalis have been condemned to wander in search of food for nearly 2 years, some because supplies simply ran out, others in the belief that nowhere could be so desolate and desperate as the one they were already in. The roads in Somalia's famine zones are still never empty of travelers, but for some, these roads are now leading home. Jim Clancy, CNN.
As well as National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft and Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, Mr. Bush said he thought the U.S. forces were doing, in his words, a fine job. He emphasized that there has been no change in the mission's goal of bringing food to the Somali people and that the U.S. will collect weapons as they are found. That is in some contrast with UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali, who says the U.S.-led mission should place a priority on actively disarming Somali fighters. However, Boutros Ghali seeks to downplay any suggestion of dissent. He says the operation is in its early stages, and he says the various sides will find a common denominator, his words, between the various.
Partout en Somalie, pour l'instant, l'arrivée des troupes américaines n'a rien changé. Ils ne sont là que depuis 48 heures et ils restent à l'aéroport. Donc il n'y a pas de différence visible dans les rues jusqu'à maintenant. Cette fameuse base, la voilà, tenue depuis 24 heures par 200 Marines. L'activité aérienne y est intense. Des soldats canadiens y déchargent du matériel, des hélicoptères en assurent la sécurité. Au hasard d'un couloir, tiens, 2 officiers français les premiers dans cette région. En mission d'observation avec les Américains, ils apprécient en connaisseurs les structures de l'aérodrome.
C'est une ancienne base soviétique qui offre donc toutes les possibilités, des pistes, des taxiways, des alvéoles pour les hélicoptères. Tout est là pour offrir une superstructure satisfaisante.
Et c'est vrai que les traces de la présence soviétique sont bien visibles. Sukhoi 17 abandonné et piraté, MiG-15 rouillé, camions radio, rampe de lancement de missiles et stations d'écoute, tout rappelle que c'était la plus grande base soviétique d'Afrique. Aujourd'hui, ce sont les Américains qui l'occupent. Ce sera pour eux un des principaux points de leur dispositif.
Le point le plus important quand vous êtes en Somalie, c'est de savoir où sont les aéroports. Nous devons avoir des aéroports clés, en bon état. Celui-là en est un. Il servira de centre d'approvisionnement pour d'autres endroits, et pas seulement Baidoa.
Aujourd'hui, les Américains s'occupent encore de sécuriser la base de Balidoglu pour éviter toute mauvaise surprise.
Till hur en ung somaliska överfölls av landsmän som anklagade henne för sexuellt umgänge med franska soldater. En folkhop slet av henne kläderna och misshandlade henne innan han sen fördes bort. Hennes öde är okänt.
That have come here, the small businesses that fuel this economy. We are here from many walks of life talking about issues that are germane to this society today. My company, Integrated Business Solutions Incorporated, located in San Ramon.
Uppmärksammas av folket på gatan. En somalisk student förklarar efteråt att kvinnan prostituerat sig och därmed brutit mot de muslimska lagarna.
Computer systems company. Do not forget the small businesses who are on the verge, who are interested in the same things that big.
Men ingen ingriper.
Economy in depressed rural and urban centers.
Bob Friedman, Patricia Flaherty, Bob Reich, and Ernesto.
Svårt, men kommer att överleva.
Chefen för den franska styrkan i Somalia förnekade nu ikväll att kvinnan hade utnyttjat sexuellt av de franska soldaterna. Men han gick med på att det var dumt att hon fick åka med ett franskt militärfordon. Det finns starkt fundamentalistiska grupper här. Vi måste tänka bättre på hur vi uppträder, sa överste Michel Touron. Och så till dagen.
Comments from the United Nations Secretary General Boutros Ghali that the UN forces' role included disarming the Somali militias.
The waiting and the wasting of the people of Somalia